Keith is well known to many in the room, and his details are more than adequately covered in the bulletin. But by way of personal introduction to our speaker, I'm reminded of an article in a magazine a few years ago entitled A BFO, where a CEO of a large corporation in America shared their blinding flash of the obvious when they realised that every time they opened their mouth, they were in fact making a speech. Every conversation with staff, shareholders and the public needed to be treated like a speech. Care, thought and perfect preparation. Our speaker must have read the same article. Every time I've heard Keith speak in small and large groups, he, like his leadership colleagues in David and Ken and others, are consummate communicators. Indeed, this came through to us mid-year when President David, Rotarian Michael and I represented the club at our joint promotion of Shining a Light on the Homelessness. The death of Phil Walsh overtook the match day activity and the pre-dinner game was quite subdued. There was only one speaker that evening, Keith, and his words and thoughtfulness were awesome. His speech that night allowed us all to be part of the occasion, but at the same time realise and appreciate shared grieving and putting the events of that week into perspective for us. Perhaps this is one of the keys of moving from good to great. Rotarians and guests, Keith Thomas.
Well, thank you, Peter, and thank you, everyone, for inviting me today. And to the President, David, it really is a great privilege to be here to speak to the Rotarians. David and I have had a friendship over the last few years, really since the moment I stepped into the club, and he has just very quietly been supporting me and what we've been doing with kind, insightful words, and I very much appreciate that. We have been talking about over the last few years the change that has occurred at Port Adelaide, and there is a story in all of that. It's very easy to forget, even 3 or 4 years ago, just how desperate the situation was at Port Adelaide when I arrived there in late 2011, because things have improved a little bit. So what I intend to do today is really just to talk about some of the key learnings, if you like, from our journey. Not in any way to suggest that you'll learn much from it, because I know this room is full of industry leaders in their own right and management experts, but perhaps it adds to the to the narrative around leadership and organisational change. So Port Adelaide has a very, very long history of success, and to put a figure on it, 145 years old, 37 SANFL and AFL premierships. But the staggering number for me is that in those 145 years, it's been in the grand final on 76 occasions. So it is an incredible organisation for sustained success, if you like. And driving its success was a very, very singular mission, which was, we exist to win premierships. And it served it well, and it probably was at its height in the era of Fos Williams in the 50s and early 60s. But by 2008, 9, 10, 11 and 12, it seemed like a long way away, and the club, I felt at that time, had lost its identity. It had become confused. When I first started, the anonymous guy was Andrew Demetriou, who was the head of the AFL at the time, and he said to me before I joined, he said, "Well, look, it just can't get any worse, right? So if you can turn it around, or if you can put a team together that can turn it around, well, good luck to you." I have subsequently been told that he had very low expectations, actually, when this change occurred, and I suspect that we were 2 or 3 years away from losing the licence. I think we were in that poorer shape that they were contemplating Plan B. But he was wrong. We were, at the end of 2011, being smashed in the media. That score there is 31 goals 11 to 5 goals 2 against Hawthorn. A side that we got within an inch of beating in a preliminary final last year, 2014. But things were going to turn south for us even further. In 2012 was really my first year, and we decided very early that Matthew Primus wasn't going to take us forward. We had an urgent objective, which was to arrive at Adelaide Oval with momentum. We didn't feel as if we could dribble into this opportunity. We needed to run into it, which put a great deal of urgency on the decision making. So we spent all of 2012 reviewing the overall operation, and we did it privately, not publicly, as Geelong had done in 2006. And one of the decisions made was that Matthew needed to leave. Now, that in itself, I think, was sellable, because we weren't particularly going well, and whilst he was a young coach, under-resourced, I was firmly of the view that he wasn't what we needed. The problem was that at the same time we lost our president, who resigned selflessly, actually. This is Brett Duncanson. This is the press conference at which that was announced. And he decided that the board needed to accept some responsibility for Matthew's failure, and resigned. Same press conference. So what that created was, we went from a controlled management situation to a crisis of leadership. We then lost John McCarthy, and this happened less than 2 weeks after we made the move on the coach, or 3 weeks, sorry. John McCarthy was an integral part of our footy club. Only been with us a year and a bit, but he was a loved player. Lost overseas on a trip. So we had problems. Getting smashed on the field, hammered in the media, coach gone, president gone, and then a tragedy which affected the entire playing squad. So we were very much in a situation where we had to react. Now, I know that most organisations face that moment where they have to decide, are we going to change or not? And we weren't really in that situation. We were in a situation where we had to. I often say that mediocre organisations or good organisations aren't compelled by the urgency required for significant change, because it's not life-threatening. Being mediocre, you can survive being mediocre in most industries. You're middle of the road. In an elite AFL environment, and certainly the way that we were performing, we decided on a different path, and that path was transformational change, and we felt like it was life and death. So we had to put a couple of stakes in the ground, and the first one was that we decided we wanted to be really good. We didn't want to be average, we needed to be really good. That was the Port Adelaide way. The industry we're in demands it, and so we lifted the standards of the entire group. And firstly, it starts with language, people and language. We made 15 changes to our leadership structure throughout the club and board within 12 months. And then we changed the language of the club. And David, Ken and I were the designated speakers. We were a very tightly controlled agenda, and where we started to change the narrative. And it was all about transitioning to another level. Now, this is not an easy thing. It's easy to say, not so easy to do. It requires, when we first started, there was a great deal of fear within the organisation about what was going to happen. They'd seen leadership change. There was a sense within our club of, are we good enough? Am I going to be part of the next phase? From a management point of view, you needed to be very reassuring, whilst at the same time quite brutal. There were some people that weren't good enough. Surprisingly enough, the vast majority were. They just didn't understand that. They didn't know that. And when tested, have come through with flying colours. One of the things that came out of the review that I did was that our playing list was okay. We were getting absolutely hammered about the quality of the playing list. And yet all of our, certainly my impression, based on the quality of player and the draft picks that we had in our squad, was that it should be better than it was, and the external views supported that, and we backed that in. So the same guys that were on that page in 2011 are still there today, by and large. So understanding the real problem was one of the key tasks, and I think one of the things that we got right, because we made a lot of changes, but there were some things we didn't change, which were just as important. I think for all organisations, this is a real challenge. Being excellent is highly uncomfortable. You have to put yourself in a place which is not comfortable on a daily basis. Now, the human condition is to find second gear whenever you possibly can, right? As soon as you start to over-rev, you want to pull it back a little bit. And all of our people are the same. But finding excellence and creating an environment that where that is understood and accepted is a great challenge. And some of the people that we brought into the program, Hinckley, Burgess, David Kosh, all of these sort of people, Alan Richardson, Phil Walsh, Michael Voss, now Nathan Bassett, all of these people understand what it's about, and it's about initially changing the balance of power inside the organisation. We placed a great deal of emphasis on leadership. Now, when I talk to our leaders about the role that they need to play in this transitional change or transformational change that we're going through, as leaders we need to explain the why. Why are we doing this? Not always obvious. For a lot of the guys in our group, they could argue where I'm doing my part okay. And so you can sit tight. Well, we didn't. We decided we would challenge all of that and explain that we can't continue to be, as a football club, a club that's just contained and confined to its suburb. We needed to play a bigger game. You would have heard David, our president, talk about getting outside of our postcode. And so we started to do things like we introduced Eastern Advisory Boards, where we started to hook in with expats all over Australia. We're now, yesterday I was in Beijing on the Great Wall of China, talking to business people in China about investing in Port Adelaide. Now, in 2011, as I was starting to talk about these things, 2012, people were just shaking their head going, what are you talking about? Like, it's Port Adelaide. It was small thinking. We launched Renault as our major sponsor on the MCG. Now, right now, that seems like that's okay. But at the time, we had to pay journalists to go there and cover the event, right? And it was a bold, bold statement of intent. The statement was, we play on the national stage, we belong here, and we intend to play here a lot longer, a lot more. So we're actually going to run this launch on the MCG. Blew them away. It was about thinking bigger, and part of the leadership challenge was to explain that. We said to a 21-year-old girl in our events team, we said, you've got 12 months to come up with a world-class game day experience at Adelaide Oval. I want you to search the world and bring back that proposal. Now, we didn't send her anywhere. She had to do it on the internet, right? But she did. We put it away, and we're very proud of that. We're very proud of the experience that we put on at Adelaide Oval, and it was a 21-year-old marketing coordinator who did it. It's brilliant. Just by being challenged and explaining that we cannot turn up and not use this opportunity at Adelaide Oval to create a different impression of Port Adelaide. So we had to explain the why. We did that. We had to talk about what change looks like, and we spent a lot of time painting that picture, both externally and internally. A fundamental leadership role in our view. And then you have to talk about the how, and I think we all understand that, and we spent a lot of time doing that. But the emphasis on leadership in a change environment can't be underestimated, and we set that up and we contained it, and we've maintained pretty much the same group, apart from a couple of assistant coaches who got us on the right track. We spent a lot of time getting on the same page. You can't drive an agenda of change if the key people are not absolutely aligned. And if you're facing as the Rotary Club of Adelaide, if you're facing a moment of change or challenge, the first thing I would be saying is, if you're going to embark upon an agenda to shift things, make sure that everyone's pulling in the same direction. We couldn't afford any division. The previous board was divided, and I'll talk about that in a minute. And it's like an anchor, as you know. So I think one of the great things that we've been able to achieve is a real consistency of message and purpose. The other thing that we decided to do very early was we couldn't be a group that would sit on our hands. We had to make decisions. And some of those decisions seem simple now, but the decision to appoint Travis Boak as captain over Bradley Ebert was a fundamental decision about leadership. Brad Ebert was the obvious choice. He was the media darling. The Ebert name would have been a very, very easy thing to do. Travis Boak is the soul of the club and is the inspirational leader. Wasn't known then, but has been a absolutely crucial part of our on-field revival. There are many that the decision to go to China, to embrace all of our community programs, the decision to broaden our mission to embrace community was fundamental to the changing narrative around Port Adelaide. And it takes courage. I still get criticised today about, how does going to China help us win a premiership? How does that do that? How does going to Alice Springs with the Aboriginal Academy that we've set up, who we can't draft any player out of, how does that investment help us win? Well, what it does a few things, I reckon. In a world where integrity, drugs, misbehaviour is rampant throughout society, Port Adelaide put a stake in the ground and said, well, we're actually going to win the right way. So we took a very hard stance on drugs, which is going to test us. I guarantee you there's going to be a high-profile player somewhere, I don't know who it is yet, but there will be a high-profile player who will test our resolve on this at some point in our near future. I'm almost certain. But it's helping us to define what we're all about from a values point of view. When we went after Paddy Ryder, we introduced him to 17 people in our club, and the reason he came, could have gone anywhere, was because of our Aboriginal programs. The reason that Renault joined us was not because of our 14th position on the ladder, it was because they had heard about our End Hunger campaign, because we'd made that the central point of our communication strategy. When Energy Australia came on, a multinational, they didn't come on because we're going to win a premiership. They came on because their leader, Catherine Tanner, is passionate about our Aboriginal program. So when you ask me, how does it work? By doing good things, how does it work? It's not an exact science. All I know is that Port Adelaide has become a broader, more appealing, better organisation as a result of shifting its focus to be more than winning on Saturday. Now, I'm hoping that when we start losing, we won't go down the tube like we did in 2011 and 12, because we mean more than that. And I think it'll give us some resilience. I tell you, when I was on the Great Wall of China yesterday, right? It's a life-changing experience to have a look at what happened there. But I was standing with a young boy who's 18 years old, and they were there because this 15 or 17 Aboriginal boys were there because they passed Year 12. Now, there was an article in The Australian that was written, and one of the comments on it was critical, saying that we were rewarding mediocrity because they only had to achieve a C grade to pass and to get on this trip. So the boy that I was standing with had lost both his parents to drugs, both his brothers to car accidents, lived at Sejuna, had to relocate to South Australia, here in Adelaide, live with another family, go to school and fight his way to Year 12 and pass. Was racially abused at a Port Adelaide game here this year. His trip was well earned, and every boy in that group has a story to tell. Now, if Port Adelaide is not a better club for supporting that, I think we're judging it wrongly. The thing about it is, Port Adelaide has made an active decision because we get no football benefit out of that program at all. We go to the APY lands, we go to the Barkly region, which is just north of Alice Springs, or up in that Alice Springs area, for no return. It's costs, but it makes us a better place. And it enables me to talk to our 8 Aboriginal players and our 40 full listed players about being better people and better citizens. And we stand by it, and I think that over time that'll help us. This was a very, very big decision. I don't know if you'll be surprised by this or not, but in my first 3 weeks, I was hammered by the powers that be in football with the idea that Port Adelaide needed to change its name, its colours, probably leave Alberton Oval and start afresh. It's time was the slogan. You can't fix this. It's time to make a clean start. And this is an interesting point in understanding what the real problem is. And again, there's better experts in the room than me about change management. But can you imagine what footy would look like today if we had taken that on? We chose not to. What we chose to do was to acknowledge that there was a divide between the Power and the Magpies. I had no idea about that, but it was because they were separated at the moment of introduction of the AFL. They weren't able to interact with each other, so there was divided, and with that went the crowd, split in half. A very passionate crowd. The success between 97 and 2007 was of the Power, masked a lot of it, but as soon as that success left, it left a hole. So when we won a premiership in 2004, we had 35,000 members. When we came ninth in 2015, we had 60,000. And that was because we brought the team, the club, the entire community together. And it was about embracing the Magpies under the banner of "We are Port Adelaide and proud of it." We're not hiding from anything. We're not changing. This is Port Adelaide, and we're proud of that. What we needed to do was to explain it. What does that mean? Think about Rotary. What is Rotary? What role does it play? That saying down here, "be a gift to the world," is a beautiful saying. And you're doing that, right? We had the same challenge. We had to explain what it is we stand for, what it is we're about, and we needed to include more people in it, rather than the old Port Adelaide way, which was back against the wall, fighting everyone. We've become far more inclusive. And that was a fundamental step in the process. I think we've lifted the energy of the place. It's a much more positive language that comes out of Port Adelaide now, and Ken Hinckley is a great spokesperson for us, as is David. We came under the themes of you've got to be compelling. If you're going to bring change to this, you've got to be interesting. So we put David King, a commentator, in the commentary box for Ken's first game. Imagine that. First game as an AFL coach. He's missed out 5 times before that. We'd lost to Melbourne 2 weeks earlier in the NAB Cup, and we put the Fox Sport commentator in his commentary box, in his coaching box, and broadcast. That's being bold, being compelling, opening the club up. And we made a lot of decisions along those lines. We try and keep it real. We try and keep it real. Again, as a leader, you've got to be believable. If you want people to come along with you, they've got to believe in what you're saying. And the best way to do that is to tell the truth. Tell the truth. Be true to your values. They all know that we're all bullshitters, right? We all know, right? We try and avoid that like the plague, wherever possible, and I think it's served us okay. We started very much as a top-down. It was a top-down scenario. We had to bring the rest of the team up and bring them along for the ride, and we now think we're getting a balance of power inside the club, which is driving us. And overall, I think it's been an exercise in clarity, defining what it is we want to be, what it is we stand for, and connecting our community through our actions and our words and most importantly our on-field deeds probably, to a broader vision, connecting our community to that broader vision, which is we want to win, but we want to win the right way. We want to make people proud. Do you mind if I play just a quick video, Pete, just to finish this thing off? I'm going to get some help. So just think back to those bleak headlines at the start. This is how we capture it these days. So you would have noticed a little bit of Chinese in there, right? So yesterday I presented to an organisation that has 1.5 million staff, and they're thinking about getting involved with Port Adelaide. Thank you very much. It's been a great privilege to be here. Thank you.
I thought that video was compelling. Sorry, we're out of time. Sorry, Adri, we're out of time. A consummate communicator always times it so there's no time for official questions, but I'm sure Keith will be here afterwards for questions. I must say that when I arrived at my seat today, I thought there was a new tradition, a welcome home gift. Then I realised I was Speaker's host. So I now have a gold, or a pen in a gold box at least, as a gesture of our affection, thanks and appreciation for your time today, Keith, as we march towards greatness. Thank you. Thank you very much.